And live from the Scheinfeld Center Innovator Studio at Santa Barbara City College, it's the Enlightened Entrepreneur Podcast, where we inform and inspire Gen Z to become even more entrepreneurial and innovative in our global economy. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, director of the Scheinfeld Center, and thank you everybody for joining us here to become your own boss, create livelihood that matters, and make the world a better place. Well, Gen Z is shaking up the workforce. They are the most entrepreneurial generation to date, and they're using side hustles to test their hand at entrepreneurship while still working or studying, and they aspire to go big and create positive impact. And also, as employees, they want a sense of ownership in the work that they do. Ultimately, these dynamics make it clear that Gen Z and employers and business owners from any generation should know about employee-owned businesses. But what is employee ownership? How does it work? And why does it matter? Well, joining us to help break it down is business advisor and entrepreneur Greg Loosvelt. Greg manages a community of startup growth leaders and is passionate about economic equality. As a Yale graduate, he was one of the founders of Mitchel Madison Management Consultants and founder of Sagres Partners, a long-short hedge fund. He has invested in companies of all sizes and has started and sold companies focusing on increasing access to products and services that unlock human potential from software to sustainability. Greg has spent most of his career as a financial analyst and CEO with responsibilities ranging from strategist to portfolio manager and scaling operations to product management while rolling out global products. Greg, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, well, 30 minutes is going to go super quickly. So if you're ready, let's jump right in.
Okay,
awesome. So we're talking about employee ownership. Let's start right from the top. What is employee ownership?
Okay, employee ownership can take many forms, but however, let's start with the general concept. And I like pie, so I'm going to talk about it in a pie. And employee ownership is really sharing the pie. So employees help to grow the pie bigger, and now everyone should get a piece of the pie. And it could take the form of actual ownership of shares or a distribution of profits.
Okay, that makes sense. So why employee ownership? I mean, why should we care about this now?
Well, I think we all should care about it all the time, but in particular now, I think people should benefit from the hard work they do. And, we're at this unique time where I feel there's a seismic shift happening in the US, certainly, where the rights, the money from corporations has gone maybe too far to shareholders, and now it seems to shifting back to the workers. And you think, why? The why is that the workers are the persons that really add all the value. They are the folks that do the execution, that make the profits possible. And so the why is that we should reward the people that are really putting the effort into making the company successful.
Right. So as we talked about this, our main demographic at the college is Gen Z, and they are really voicing how important it is to them to be feeling like the company really values them and that their work is being valued. So this is just so timely. Could you talk about the legal structures? And I understand there's 4 main types of employee-owned businesses. So yeah, can you walk us through that?
Certainly. Well, let's talk about the general forms. And there's obviously subsets of all these. One in particular is stock ownership, kind of the Silicon Valley. I do a startup, I get stock in the startup, or I work for a large company like IBM and I get shares in IBM. That's owning, distribution of the shares of ownership to employees for the work they've done and how long they've been there. So we call that kind of stock compensation. Another one is a federal program called ESOPs. It's an employee stock ownership plan. And it's really a retirement plan. You think of it as almost a 401k, government regulated. You get it when you retire. You actually own part of the company. You have shares in the company. When you retire, they buy the shares back from you. Another one that's been around for a long time is co-ops. So we form like a credit union co-op or a bunch of different types of co-ops, a farm co-op, where we actually, everyone owns and participates in the voting of the co-op. Every person gets one vote. The last form is something that's been out in Europe for quite a bit, but not here much. There's probably less than a couple dozen companies in the US that have what we call employee ownership trusts, where the company is owned by a trust and all the employees share in the profits each year of that trust. It has a little more flexibility and is less costly to set up.
How does a business, there's all these different types. How does a business choose what type of structure is best for them?
I think we go back and think about why are we doing the structure? So first of all, start, kind of with first principle. What's attractive to this structure? If we're looking at a replacement for our 401k or retirement, an ESOP would be a very good structure. And certainly if you have a large number of employees, you can bear the cost of setting that up and the regulatory costs each year of making sure it's done properly. So for larger employees that are concerned, employers that are concerned with having a long-term retirement plan put in place, an ESOP is a very good plan. The difficulty with an ESOP is that it's this fancy word called fiduciary. Whoever runs the ESOP has to make sure it's done in a fiduciary manner. That means getting the largest price for the shares. So if someone wanted to buy the company, the fiduciary would have the responsibility to sell the company. And then the employees could be without a job, or jobs could transfer from community. So an employees would not have any rights to say no to that. So that's, in many ways, if you want to keep the jobs for the community, an ESOP maybe is not the right structure. So if this is really to keep jobs in the community, and one of the things I'm so strong about is trying to build a talent base within our community. And so I look at the employee ownership trust, which is held in perpetuity for the benefit of the community, and it can be set up that way. So the jobs will stay there, the company can't be purchased, and it's going to be benefit the community also. So you think almost of the community. It also can be set up for environmental reasons, so it can benefit some environmental things. So there's lots of things you can do with it, since you don't have this fiduciary right involved in that. So for smaller companies that want to be within a community, where the cost is a little less to set up, where the money is distributed every year to the employees, so you get profits every year distributed. It's not so much a retirement. Of course, you could take that annual distribution and put it in a 401k and have it as a retirement. It really gives flexibility to the employees to have it either as a retirement planning or to spend annually. That might be a good situation, have an employee ownership trust. On the other hand, if you're a fast growing startup or a large company that is publicly traded, where you have shares to give out, you've got outside investors that own a significant part of the company, then a stock ownership plan might be very good too to set up in that kind of situation. Co-ops are usually for a small number, farm co-ops and things like that, where there's not very many members. Was that helpful?
Yeah, that is really super helpful. So the thing about the ESOP is that if the business were sold, it could be sold to somebody outside of the community, is what you're saying. And then therefore, all that benefit that a community had been experiencing with that, both on the worker and on the economy end, that could all go away.
That's correct. So since you have this fiduciary right, you might even close the plant, move it to someplace else, close the facility. Obviously, the employees that had ownership of the stock would benefit, but the community would lose in terms of future job growth, future talent building within the community.
So I have a pretty fundamental question, which is why is this not the way business is done just naturally, right? I mean, you would think that, helping workers create and establish a livelihood, put money away, for their retirement, to feel like they have ownership in business. I mean, isn't that just good business? Why are we needing to look at this as alternative rather than this is the way that things just are?
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think part of it is that, it hasn't traditionally been set up this way. It's been this more of approach that, we had individuals that benefited tremendously as individuals and didn't share. And I think, and in some ways, maybe that is even something that we all as a country kind of, lust for. I mean, we look at, folks like, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or, folks like that and say, gosh, do we want to be them? And if you really had employee ownership, they wouldn't have accumulated as much, right? So maybe in some ways we look at it and we think we could be that. But I think, for most of us, as I think most of us are just average, that, this is a much better situation where we all can benefit from each other and help each other out. So I agree completely.
Yeah, yeah. What are the steps that are required in order to set this up? It sounds kind of complicated, and this is what we know about business owners is they've got a lot on their plate. And while there can be this good intention that they want to build this culture that really honors their employees and really builds that trust with them in terms of we're in this together, it sounds great, but where does it start even? And I guess part of the question too is, when does this start? Like, when is the best time to set this up? It almost seems like we need a change in the thinking of the founders and CEOs themselves, and so does that happen? Does that need to happen like going into the business and setting up the culture? Or is this something that is best done a little bit down the road after the business is more established?
Well, I think it can be done in a bunch of ways. So maybe we can take a few examples. First of all, I don't want to think that this is something that doesn't happen. I think there's about 9 million people that participate thus far in ESOPs, probably, greater than another 11 million people that participate and some kind of form of stock ownership within companies. Certainly the co-op and the employee ownership trust are probably a couple 100,000. They're much smaller. So it is happening. And so I don't want you to think it's something that is not happening. And I think, we're moving from a notion in this country where, labor and management were kind of at odds to where we kind of work together. And I certainly, and since the 70s in this country, with startups, you see tremendous amount of stock ownership in startups. So you do see that happening. So it is happening, probably on smaller scales, but it's increasing. I think more and more people are aware of that. I think it can happen at all stages. I think it can happen. Certainly, I work with a lot of startups, and I encourage startups to have, ownership within the company. And it's not perfect. As I say, the worst day of any startup is when you go public, because you made everyone so wealthy that no one needs to work anymore. And so you just half your labor force can disappear because they got all the stock and they don't need to work. So, it has some negative benefits. But it's so you can start as a startup, you can share and ownership. You can do a stock option plan, which most people encourage you to do. It's a way to, make people work harder, and it works. It's certainly, Silicon Valley's evidence of that, of how well it's worked. So I think that can happen. Since the 70s, ESOPs have taken place, and there's tremendous tax advantages for an owner in an ESOP to sell his shares to his employees. It's a tax-free exchange. If you can imagine, the government's going to allow you to leave your company and take all the money out tax-free if you sell it to your employees with an ESOP. And that's why, so the government offers a huge incentive for companies to form an ESOP. And so that's usually used when a company has been established. The owner might or might not want to leave the business, sell the business for some reason. And the government offers a great incentive to do that. So that happens that way. The government does not offer any tax incentives for an employee ownership trust or co-ops. So they could happen either at the beginning or when someone wants to leave or sell the firm. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. That does. So now that we've kind of talked about when is the best time, what are the steps? Like if a business decides, okay, let's do this, what are the steps that they need to go through?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's really, really important. They have the right culture. They have a culture where you have that employee involvement, engagement, that they want to own and run the company and take ownership of the company. So I think that's so important. And to have that set of leaders in the company that can take the company as owners and manage the company. So I think it starts with a real culture that do you have that set of employees, that mentality within the company that, we want to own this. We want this to be ours. And I think we're getting that so much in America now that, I think people take pride, not only pride in their work, but also pride that this could be mine. It's more, today's Jobs Friday, the first Friday of every month. And, I think it's more, most of us want more than a job. We want some place. We spend a long time there. We spend 8+ hours. We spend a long time with the folks we're next to, sometimes longer than with our family members. And we really want more than just a job. We want that to be a significant event in our life and feel like we have something that is important to us. So I think the culture is the first place that we start. And I think that's probably the most important place is the culture, to make sure that we have the right culture in place.
Yeah, that's super important. And that starts right from the get-go, and it's kind of an emanation of the founders or CEOs who are bringing the company together.
I always say to folks, everyone's got a good notion of what to do. We all can have lots of notions like this could be a great business or that could be a great thing to do, a great service. And I have them all the time. And I'm sure you do. But it's execution. It's like taking that and then making something out of it, which is really hard to do. And that's why that culture and that employees that are really want to have the employee ownership of the company. It's the most important thing because they have to be committed to doing that. And I think that's why that's the first step, to make sure you have a group that is.
There are a lot of people who are starting businesses who are not in a high growth industry, and they may have a desire to have a small team, right? Maybe not grow really big initially. And for our students and for Gen Z, they're kind of learning the ropes. They're very avid in what they're doing, but they're learning the ropes. If they are starting out and they have a concept and they're testing it and they're bringing it, it's showing promise, and they would like to head this direction, which, like for that particular type of business where it's not going to be a high scaling, growth business, which form do you think might be best in that particular situation?
I think really the employee ownership trust is best because you're not dealing with a stock price or an equity price that's going to go up a lot in value and change every year, but you're distributing the profits. And that's what that model is all about, as opposed to an ESOP or stock ownership plan, which is really, looking forward to the increase in stock price, increase in equity price. So I think the employee ownership trust is really the right model in that situation. It's a model I hope that we can test in our community soon.
Santa Barbara County would really benefit from this, for sure. Hey, should we take a few questions from our audience? Janique asks, where can people find the experts within a community who know about this type of thing? Because she says she would need help to get started with this, but she has no idea who to turn to.
Well, I think certainly, and we should post some things, and maybe we can post it on your site, Julie, some resource references. But I would think certainly the Seinfeld Center, and certainly I work with an organization called SCORE, which we have mentorships, and we mentor people. We'd be glad to work with folks on this too. And scoresantabarbara.org, they could find and ask for a mentor.
That's great. And so SCORE is nationwide. So some of our audience is outside of our region, right? So SCORE is just a great resource for any business owner anywhere. It's a program of the Small Business Administration, and they offer no cost mentoring for founders at any level, of whether they just are putting their idea together or they're already in business, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very impressive program. Certainly, SCORE has helped our students in our center, the Scheinfeld Center, support the needs of our students, because our students have so many diverse interests, and a lot of types of different ventures that they bring forward. And so SCORE has just been so instrumental to get that expertise and mentoring in, because no one person can address all of those needs really effectively. So I think the takeaway for that question is SCORE is a really good option. And certainly in Santa Barbara here, the Scheinfeld Center are here. We focus on our students at Santa Barbara City College, but really anywhere it's look to the centers in your community, that are focused on helping people start and grow businesses. And they can likely steer you in a favorable direction. Let's take another question. So how do you build that culture and encourage that mentality to start an ESOP? So this is getting into what do you actually do to build a culture that would facilitate an ESOP?
It's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And I think it's a couple things that are really essential when you're managing a business, is to really have transparency in your business, so people get a good sense. I say there's three things you do in a business: you get customers, you deliver their product or service, and you get paid. And the first thing is if you think I'm going to have owners in, for everyone to kind of understand. So I think having at least an annual type of get together where you set goals and objectives for next year, you start educating your workforce and understanding how the business is run, what we're trying to do together, you building a team. So and this is a perfect time of year. You think when you should do it, it's probably this October, November time period where you get ready for the next year and launching your plans for next year. And so I think that's the first thing, of having transparency and having a group come together, and each group working, either the folks that are in charge of getting customers, they make presentations. The folks that are in charge of delivering a service or building a product make presentations. The folks that are in charge of getting paid, all those folks that do that accounts receivable and accounts payable items, they make presentations and talk about the challenges of what their things and what they're trying to do, and metrics they're trying to hit for next year. So I think the first thing is transparency in the business, so everyone understands what we're doing, what we're trying to hit, what targets are we trying to hit for next year, who's in charge of those, having a really good organizational chart that shows who does what and who's responsible for. And then, I say we all get report cards, and in business, it's your objectives or your milestones that you're supposed to hit. And we all look at how we get graded. And I say setting up that transparency, reporting structures, org charts, and getting people involved is the culture you start to build, so that you can have a real ownership in the company.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Such awesome points. And another precursor to that could be, I think, when an entrepreneur is just even starting to think about the company and has not yet formed it, the exercises that we do in building mission statements, and the vision for the company. I mean, that's that's kind of where, when you get together with your team of employees and with the different groups, work groups, that I think should be a driving force in the questions that come up and the discussions that are had, is how are we delivering on that? And I think it can help the decision-making process quite a bit.
I agree completely. I think you're so right. I always start out, and I'm sure you do too, with, if you and I are going to start a business together today, we have some kind of founders agreement where we talk about what our responsibilities are, what we're trying to accomplish, what our missions statement is. So I think you're absolutely right. That kind of founders agreement is a core if you're just starting out.
Yeah, really good. Let's take another question. Let's see. Wilma asks, does employee ownership work for big companies? If yes, wouldn't it be confusing not having a hierarchy within a bigger company?
It's a great question. So let's try to split those up. It does work in larger companies. ESOPs are really, there's companies with thousands of employees that have ESOPs in place, and you absolutely do need a hierarchy within the company. It doesn't mean, in a co-op, one vote, one member, one vote. That's only where we really have that democracy type of structure. In the other three, I think it isn't one member, one vote type of situation. So you do have that structure. Now, in an employee ownership trust, it's the trustees that run it and pick out who the manager is going to be. In a ESOP, it would be by ownership of shares. You would determine a board would get elected. It's pretty common, in Europe, especially, companies such as Volkswagen has a bunch of employees that sit on their board. Half the board is employees and elected by the employees. So it does work in larger companies, but there is still the hierarchical nature of it.
Okay, good. Yeah, really good question, Wilma. That was a great answer, Greg. Thanks so much. Okay, another question. I think we can get one more in. What's the biggest piece of advice you have for what businesses can do for employees?
Gosh, that's a large question. I think it goes back to, a very simple rule. It's, as you mentioned earlier, I ran what I call a consulting group, which is basically a body shop of people that go out and do work every day for you. And the most important, as you know, when you own something like that, the most important thing you worry about is, are those people going to show up the next day? Because if not, I'm what I sell in that business, I sell time. And if no one shows up, I don't have any time to sell. So you realize very quickly that it's so important that you treat everyone that works for you like you want to be treated. And I think that's the most key. Everyone wants to be treated. Everyone wants to do a really good job, and everyone wants to be treated like they're special. And I think that's the key to the thing. And I think employee ownership is only one part of that. The share of profits makes someone feel like you honor my work, you respect my work, and you're willing to share in the profits that I've generated here. And I think that's only one part of it. I think the transparency is another part of it. I think in having opportunity and education is another part of it. I think being in making sure that you feel as an employee that you're learning and growing within the company is another part of it. So I think there's many parts of it, but it comes down to treat me like you would want to be treated.
Yeah, I love that answer. Honor and respect. I mean, doesn't just about all of life come down to those two things, to make things work. That's fantastic. Well, if you can believe it, that's our time, Greg. And thank you so much for joining us here today. This is a very timely movement. As you said, it's been going on for a while, but now hopefully gaining steam. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch this movement and be involved in the movement, hopefully here in Santa Barbara County. And in fact, for our audience, you'll want to be sure to tune in next week on our YouTube channel here for the live stream of our Get Real Shark Tank, where 3 SBCC student founders who have completed the 2021 Get Real Accelerator, they're going to compete head to head for a $10,000 award. And there's an audience choice portion where your vote counts. Talk about honor. I mean, I think if a community is going to support small business, they should show their support, right? And your vote matters in that. Your say matters for the type of business that you really want to see for us here in Santa Barbara County. So be sure and tune into that. Follow us on Instagram for all the details. We're going to be running the public vote on Instagram. And additionally, with that, Greg is serving as one of the judges and will announce an innovative new program here in Santa Barbara County that business owners can turn to for capital, for tailored business training, and business consulting to make their vision a reality. It's a collaboration with SBCC's Scheinfeld Center and also SCORE that Greg was talking about, and also the SBCC Foundation. And so be sure to tune in. It's going to be super exciting. Greg, thank you again for being with us. And to our audience, we hope that this discussion supports you in considering whether employee ownership is right for you as an entrepreneur and business owner or as an employee. Put your thoughts about employee ownership down in the comments. And if you have any questions we didn't get to, be sure to include them down there and we'll answer them in the comments section. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to support our community. And until next week, we'll see all of you. Bye-bye. Thanks again, Greg.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, that's it. We did it.
Okay.